Click. Again, click. Reed stood motionless, his thumb still depressing the igniter button on the propane heater. Click. Just the sound of metal striking flint. No accompanying whoosh of gas. The high desert dawn cold wasn't just outside. It had found its way in, seeping into the joints of the single-wide trailer and deep into his own. It was that damp, persistent November chill that smelled of finality. Reed released the button. His breath plumed in a white cloud in the dim kitchenette. He stared at the white propane tank, as if sheer focus could will it to be full. It didn't work. This was the first of the month, the day of reckoning. His savings were a joke. The VA disability check had been pending for 12 days. He knew that language. Pending meant someone in a Phoenix office had spilled coffee on their keyboard and decided it was next week's problem. Reed's refrigerator, when opened, cast a weak, guilty light on a jar of mustard, half an onion, and something in a butter dish he'd sworn not to look at again. Desperation wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow erosion. It was calculating how many miles were left in his rust-pocked Ford Ranger. The gas gauge was broken, but he knew the sound of a near-empty tank. Against the gas needed to drive 80 miles to the next VA appointment that they would cancel at the last minute. It was the low, guttural huff from the corner. Bolt lifted his graying muzzle from his paws. The dog was a contradiction. An 80-pound Belgian Malinois with a professor's brain and a broken athlete's body. His hips weren't what they used to be, and a silver-white scar ran down his snout where someone in the Kunar province had tried to end him with a fighting knife. Bolt wasn't begging, Bolt was assessing. Reed went to the pantry. It, too, was empty, except for one thing. On the top shelf, sitting alone, was a single can, imported, a brand of joint formula dog food he had to drive to Victorville to get. $12 a can, the last one. Reed grabbed the can opener. The metallic chunk, chunk, chunk echoed. Bolt's relief was a non-negotiable. It was the only thing left that made sense. Reed scraped the odorous pate into the stainless steel bowl. He could drink black instant coffee. He could chew on stale crackers. But this dog would eat like a king. Bolt rose, his joints popping audibly. He waited. He waited for Reed's nod, the release command. Only then did he eat, methodically, with discipline. Loyalty wasn't an emotion, it was a protocol. And that's when Reed heard it. The crunch of gravel. A white USPS Jeep was already pulling away, spitting dirt as it retreated down his access road. Mail Wednesday, he'd forgotten. Mail was always bad news. Pink final notice paper. Beige, you may already be a winner, cardstock. Both were lies. He walked outside, the cold a physical slap. He opened the creaking mailbox, bills, a pizza flyer. And one thing. It was heavy, cream-colored, linen paper. The embossed return address in the corner was from a San Diego law firm. Highgate and Associates, attorneys at law. His heart gave a single, misplaced thump. Lawyers meant trouble. Either he was being sued or someone was dead. He tore it open right there, his fingers clumsy with cold, or perhaps something else. It wasn't a letter, it was a legal notice. Regarding the last will and testament of Sergeant Marcus Conroy Vance, deceased, the air punched out of Reed's lungs. Conroy, a name he'd buried 6 years ago in a cloud of dust and gunfire in some godforsaken valley. A ghost. Conroy was the sole named beneficiary. You are hereby bequeathed the entirety of his remaining tangible personal property. Reed laughed. A dry, awful sound. Personal property. Conroy was a line grunt. His only property was a Zippo collection and a gambling debt. He read on. Oddly consisting of 1988 AM General M1982 military truck, VIN, a truck, a goddamn 10-ton 6x6 truck. The letter came with an invoice, not from the lawyer, but from Barstow Secure Military Storage. Unpaid storage fees, $250, due within 72 hours, or the property will be seized and sold at county auction. It wasn't a gift, it was a punchline. Reed crushed the letter. This was Conroy's last joke, a cruel, elaborate prank from beyond the grave, leaving him a 10-ton piece of junk tied to a bill he couldn't pay. He threw the paper to the ground. $250. He might as well try to fly to the moon. He turned his back, ready to let the cold have him. Krr, huff. The small noise, Reed stopped. Bolt wasn't looking at him. Bolt was staring at the crumpled paper on the ground. Reed looked at the dog. Leave it, Bolt. Bolt didn't move. He dipped his head, gently taking the paper wad in his mouth, a shockingly precise action for a dog trained to disassemble a human target, and walked to Reed. He didn't drop it. He pushed it into Reed's numb palm. Reed looked into those intelligent brown eyes. They didn't say, "I love you." They said, "This is an object. You dropped it. The task is not complete." Loyalty, not the blind tail-wagging kind. The ironclad, forged-in-fire kind. I will not let you fail. I will not let you quit. Reed took a deep breath. The cold seemed to have receded just an inch. He carefully unfolded the paper, smoothing the creases. An old military truck, a name from the past, and an impossible bill. Conroy never did anything without a reason. Not really, even his jokes had a point. Reed looked at the horizon, where the sun was finally daring to show itself. He looked down at the dog, his single, unwavering anchor, who had just reminded him that the mission was still active. "All right," Reed said, his breath steady now. "Let's go see about a ghost." The check engine light in the Ford Ranger had been on for 3 years. It was no longer a warning. It was just a feature. Reed kept his eyes on the cracked, sun-bleached ribbon of I-40. The drive from his patch of nowhere to Barstow had cost him a quarter of his remaining fuel, and the needle was already leaning nervously toward E. Beside him, Bolt sat rigid in the passenger seat, his head on a perfect swivel, tracking the alien landscape of rock and scrub brush as if it were a high-threat sector. Barstow Secure Military Storage was a generous name. It was a graveyard. 10-foot chain-link fences, topped with rusted concertina wire, enclosed 20 acres of sun-scorched dirt. The assets were skeletons, forgotten MRAPs, rows of gutted Humvees, and shipping containers baking in the 100-degree heat. The office was a construction trailer, its white paint peeling, with a sign taped to the door. "Ring bell, wait." Reed rang the bell. He waited. The sound of a daytime game show leaked through the thin aluminum door. Finally, it swung open, and a man in a sweat-stained polo shirt blinked at him. "Yeah? I'm here about the Vance estate," Reed said, holding up the legal letter. The paper was already damp in his hand. The man whose name tag read "Sale" sighed. It was a sigh of profound existential weariness. "You got the money?" "I'm here to inspect the asset before I authorize payment," Reed said, the words tasting like a lie. Sal squinted, looking past Reed to the beaten-up Ranger, then at Bolt. "Dog stays in the truck." "Dog certified," Reed said, a reflexive, cold response. "He's not a pet. He stays with me." Sal looked at Bolt, whose intelligent, unblinking stare seemed to be calculating the man's weak points. Sal looked back at Reed. He saw something in Reed's eyes, a flat, exhausted emptiness that was more intimidating than anger, and decided it wasn't worth the argument. "Fine, whatever. Don't let him piss on the tires. People gotta buy those." He grabbed a key from a board. Vance, yeah. Row 12B, the big green bastard. You got 48 hours left on that 72-hour notice. After that, it's auction, and I don't give refunds." Sal led him out into the blast furnace of the yard. The air smelled of diesel, hot metal, and creosote. "This is it," Sal said, gesturing. Reed stopped. It wasn't a truck. It was a monument to obsolescence. The M939A2 was a 10-ton, six-wheel drive cargo truck, painted in the faded woodland camouflage of a war that ended decades ago. It was a knuckle-dragger, a beast from an analog age. The tires, nearly as tall as Reed, were cracked with dry rot. The canvas top over the cargo bed was shredded, hanging in pathetic green ribbons. A bird's nest was tucked into the engine cavity. This was Conroy's final cosmic joke. "She's big," Reed said, his voice flat. "She's yours. Or the bank's, rather," Sal said, already walking back to his air-conditioned trailer. "Keys in the ignition. Not that it matters. Battery's been dead since '09. Holler if you're gonna pay. Don't holler if you're not." Reed was alone with the monster. He walked a slow circle around it, Bolt sticking close to his left knee, his movements identical. Reed's mind was a cold calculator, and the math was bad. His initial plan, sell it for scrap, was evaporating. The scrap value of 10 tons of steel might cover Sal's $250 invoice, but it wouldn't cover the cost of towing it to a scrapyard. He'd be lucky to break even. He'd be lucky to not lose money. He grabbed the massive, unergonomic door handle and pulled. Rust flaked off, but the hinges groaned and gave way. He hoisted himself into the cab. The smell hit him first. Hot vinyl, old oil, and the faint coppery scent of old circuits. The interior was brutally simple. A galaxy of gauges, all dead. A steering wheel the size of a ship's helm. No radio, no GPS, no comfort. This was a machine built to be functional, disposable, and forgotten. Just like the men who drove it. He tried the key, nothing, not even a click. He was wasting time. The truck was junk. The inheritance was a bill. He was a fool for even coming. He slammed the door, the sound a dull, heavy thunk that echoed in the heat. He was done. He let Sal have it. Let it go to auction. He'd go back to his trailer and figure out how to survive until the VA checked. Bolt, who had been sitting patiently by the massive front tire, stood up. Reed stopped. "Heel, Bolt." The dog didn't move. Bolt's body language had changed, shifting from passive observation to active, intense focus. His head was cocked, his ears forward. He wasn't looking at Reed. He wasn't looking at the perimeter. He was sniffing at the truck. "Bolt, come on, it's junk." Bolt ignored him. He moved from the front tire, trotting along the side of the truck, his nose hovering an inch off the metal frame. He passed the dual gas tanks. He passed the first set of rear wheels. Then he stopped. He stopped dead between the two massive rear axles, at a section of the truck bed's undercarriage that looked identical to every other section. Just a solid I-beam and a steel plate, caked in 30 years of grease and desert dust. Bolt went still. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He sat, his body vibrating, his nose pointed directly at the steel plate. It was not a casual sniff. It was an indication. Reed's blood went cold. He knew that posture. That wasn't Bolt the companion. That was K9 Unit 734. It was the same signal Bolt used when he found a hidden cell phone under a mattress or an IED component buried under a pile of rubble. It was the signal that said, "There is something here that does not belong." "What is it?" Reed whispered, crouching down. He ran his hands over the greasy steel plate Bolt was staring at. It was cold despite the heat of the day. It was solid. Right tapped it with his knuckles. Thud, thud. He moved his hand 3 feet to the left. Thud. He moved it back to the spot. Ting. It was a different sound, a hollow sound. Reed looked again. It was a perfectly flat, unremarkable piece of the truck's frame. There was no handle, no seam, no lock. It was painted over, welded, and meant to be invisible. But Conroy hadn't counted on the dog. Reed looked from the hidden compartment to the dog, and then back up at the rusting, worthless-looking relic. And for the first time, he realized Conroy's last joke wasn't a joke at all. The sun was a hammer. It beat on Reed's shoulders, on the metal carcass of the truck, on the dusty ground. The discovery of the hollow ting had changed nothing, and it had changed everything. It was still a 10-ton block of dead steel. He was still broke, and the 48-hour clock was still ticking. Reed's brain, slow and thick from the heat, processed the new equation. Fact 1, the truck was not junk. Fact 2, whatever was inside, Conroy had gone to military-grade lengths to hide it. Fact 3, he couldn't access it here, in the open, under Sal's bored gaze. Fact 4, he couldn't move it without paying Sal. He looked at his Ford Ranger. It was his only play, his last chip. The one thing of value he had left in the world, and it was the very thing he'd used to get to his own execution. There was a bitter, terrible irony in that. He walked back to the air-conditioned trailer, Bolt padding silently at his heel. He didn't knock. He just opened the door. Sal looked up from his game show, annoyed. "You done? Or you gonna pay?" "I'm gonna pay," Reed said. Sal's eyebrows shot up. "Yeah? You don't look like a man with $12.50 on him." "I don't," Reed said. He pulled the keys to the Ranger from his pocket and threw them on the desk. They skidded across a pile of invoices and stopped next to a half-eaten sandwich. "And I've got $243 in my wallet." Sal stared at the keys. "What's that?" "That's my truck, the Ford. It's got a full tank of gas minus the trip here. The title, the pink slip, is in the glove box, clean. That truck, plus my cash for the M939. And you clear the bill." Sal laughed, a short barking sound. "You're nuts. Your truck's worth 500 scrap. Tops. Your cash is 240. That's 740. The bill is 1250. The math ain't there, pal." "The math is there," Reed said, leaning forward. His voice dropped. It was not a voice for negotiating. It was a voice he'd used in small, dark rooms, far from home. Your bill is imaginary. It's a number you wrote on paper to take up space. That M99 has been sitting here for, what, a decade? It's costing you money. It's an eyesore. My truck runs. You can sell it, scrap it, part it out today. I am giving you $740 right now to get that dead piece of metal off your lot. Or you can wait for the auction where you'll get maybe $500 after you pay the auctioneer's fees. And I'll be gone. Sal stared at him. The game show blared, filling the silence. Sal looked at the keys. He looked at Bolt, who was sitting by the door, a silent, furry grenade. He looked back at Reed. "You're stuck here if you do this," Sal said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "That's my problem," Reed replied. "We got a deal?" Sal opened a drawer, pulled out a greasy carbon copy form, and slid it across the desk. "Sign the transfer. Give me the cash. Get it off my property by sundown." 10 minutes later, Reed was the owner of a 10-ton, inoperable paperweight. He was also officially stranded in the Mojave Desert. He stood by the M939, the useless key in his hand, the sun drilling into his skull. The weight of his gamble settled on him. He had traded his last shred of mobility for a secret he couldn't even reach. That's when he heard the sound. It was the whisper of expensive tires on gravel, a sound that did not belong in this boneyard. A black Lincoln sedan, so clean it looked wet, glided to a stop 50 feet away. The engine was silent. A man in a pressed pale gray suit stepped out. He was in his late 40s, with a face that looked like it had never sweated. He wore shoes that cost more than Reed's entire trailer. Bolt didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just rumbled, a vibration so low it was almost more felt than heard. The man smiled, holding up his hands as if to show they were empty. "Pardon the intrusion. I saw you from the road. You must be the new owner." Reed said nothing. His hand rested on Bolt's head. "My name is Kincaid," the man said, walking closer, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. He stopped 10 feet away. He never took his eyes off Reed, but he was clearly aware of the dog. "I'm a broker. I specialize in rare military hardware for private collectors. I've had my eye on this particular M939 for some time." Reed's blood turned to ice. "This M939? It's a shame about Sergeant Vance," Kincaid said, his tone one of practiced empty sympathy. "He was difficult to negotiate with." "It's not for sale," Reed said. Kincaid smiled as if Reed had told a good joke. Of course. But see, you're looking at it like it's a truck. I'm looking at it like it's a problem. A very large, very heavy problem. A problem you're currently stranded with. I, on the other hand, am a problem solver." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a bank envelope. "I am prepared to offer you $5,000. Cash. For this piece of history. Just sign the title, which I see you have in your hand, and I'll have a flatbed here in an hour. You'll be on a bus back to, well, wherever it is you came from. $5,000. The words hung in the air. $5,000 was not just money. It was food. It was gas. It was a new heater. It was life. It was an escape from the abyss he was currently standing in. Reed looked at the envelope. He looked at the truck. He felt Bolt's muscles tense under his hand. "How did you know Vance?" Reed asked, his voice quiet. Kincaid's smile faltered, just a fraction. "We had mutual interests. Now, about my offer, how did you know I was here?" The smile was gone. "Mr. Reed," Kincaid said, his voice now as cold as his suit, "I know a great many things. I know your name. I know about your difficult relationship with the VA. I know you just traded your only ride for this relic. You are a man at the end of his rope. I am offering you a new one. Take it." He was right. On every point. The smart play was to take the money and run. To forget Conroy, forget the truck, and survive. Reed looked at the spot on the undercarriage. The spot Bolt had found. "No," Reed said. Kincaid's jaw tightened. "I see. You're sentimental. Or you're stupid. Or maybe," his eyes flicked to the compartment, "you're just greedy." He pulled a business card from his wallet and held it out. Reed didn't take it. Kincaid wedged it into the truck's rusted door handle. "This truck has significant maintenance issues, Mr. Reed. Things have a way of breaking down. My offer stands until sunset. After that, the price drops. Significantly." Kincaid turned, walked back to his silent, air-conditioned Lincoln, and was gone in a cloud of dust. Reed stood in the swirling grit, his heart pounding a hole in his chest. He was alone, stranded, and now hunted. He looked down at Bolt. "All right," Reed whispered, his hand shaking. "Let's see what they're willing to kill for." The silence Kincaid left behind was louder than his threat. It was the sound of a clock ticking, of the sun dipping low, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. It was the sound of a trap closing. Reed was exposed. The M939 was a sitting duck, and he was the man tied to the stake. He looked at the business card Kincaid had jammed in the door. Kincaid Global Logistics. It was thick, expensive cardstock. Logistics was a clean word for a dirty business. They didn't just collect things. They acquired them. And they wouldn't take no for an answer. Sunset. Sal had told him to be off the lot by sundown. Kincaid had given him until sunset. The world was giving him about 30 minutes. "Okay, Bolt. He thinks we're stranded. He thinks we're stupid. Let's not be stranded." Reed moved with a new, cold purpose. He climbed back into the cab and threw open the massive glove compartment. It was full of desiccated mouse droppings and 30-year-old paperwork, and, tucked in the back, a heavy canvas-wrapped tool roll. He ran to the front of the truck and unlatched the massive, forward-tilting hood. A nest of wires and hoses all caked in dust. He found the battery box. He didn't need to be a mechanic to see the problem. The terminals were corroded into green-white cauliflower. The batteries themselves were swollen and cracked. Dead. $5,000. The thought was a mosquito in his ear. He swatted it away. He grabbed the tool roll and a rusted tire iron from the truck's side box. "Watch him," he said to Bolt, gesturing toward Sal's trailer. Bolt sat. He was no longer a dog. He was a sentry, his gaze locked on the only other human for miles. Reed moved through the graveyard of vehicles, a ghost in the twilight. He was shopping. He passed the Humvees. Their batteries were 12-volt, but too small. He needed heavy duty. He found what he was looking for 3 rows over. Another M939, this one partially cannibalized, its front wheels gone. Its battery box was intact. It was brutal, heavy work. The bolts were rusted solid. He put the tire iron on the head of a wrench, using his full body weight as a breaker bar. The crack of the bolt breaking free echoed in the quiet yard. The 2 batteries were 8D size, weighing 150 pounds apiece. They were built to start a diesel engine in the Arctic. He didn't carry them. He dragged them, one by one, through the dirt, his muscles screaming. By the time he got them back to Conroy's truck, he was covered in grease, grime, and acid burns. He didn't have time to be delicate. He cut the old terminals off with a set of pliers from the tool roll. He jammed the new batteries into the box. They didn't fit perfectly, but they fit well enough. He used the clamps from a set of jumper cables he'd found, creating a new, ugly, and dangerously temporary connection. Sparks flew. Bolt didn't flinch. Reed scrambled into the cab. The vinyl seat was hot from the day's last rays. He looked at the key still in the ignition. "All right, Conroy," he whispered. "You got me into this. Get me out." He turned the key. The gauges on the dash, oil pressure, water temp, volts, all snapped to life. The cab filled with the high, irritating beep of a low air pressure warning. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. He turned the key to start. The starter motor let out a low, agonized groan. The entire truck shuddered. The engine tried to turn, a single, slow ka-chunk. But it wasn't enough. The batteries were good, but the engine was cold. "Come on, you son of a bitch." He tried again. "Groon! Ka-chunk!" Sal's trailer door burst open. "Hey, what the hell are you doing out there?" Reed ignored him. He turned the key one more time, holding it. Groan! Ka-chunk! 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 Chunk! Chunk! And then detonation. The multi-fuel diesel engine exploded into a thunderous, rolling idle. A column of black, unburnt fuel smoke shot 20 feet into the purple sky, a signal fire to anyone for miles. The entire truck vibrated so hard the cracked mirrors were a blur. Reed grabbed the wheel. He looked at Sal, who was frozen in disbelief. He looked at the locked chain-link gate. He looked at the open road beyond it. He pushed in the massive clutch, grabbed the shifter, and shoved it into first gear. The truck roared. "Sorry about the gate, Sal," he yelled to no one. He didn't ease off the clutch. He dumped it. The 10-ton truck leaped forward. Bolt, thrown against the seat, scrambled to his feet on the passenger side. The M939 hit the gate not like a car hitting a fence, but like a hammer hitting a tin can. The screech of metal was instantaneous, and then he was through. He was on the access road, then the highway. He didn't drive fast, he drove heavy. He passed a sign, I-40 West, Los Angeles, I-40 East, Needles. He took neither. He stayed on the service road, running parallel to the highway, until he found what he was looking for. A dark, rocky arroyo, a dry riverbed that cut under the interstate. He wrenched the wheel and the M939 crashed down the embankment, its military-grade suspension soaking up the abuse. He drove a quarter-mile up the arroyo until the truck was hidden from the road by a concrete pylon and a wall of rock. He killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. He sat in the dark cab, his heart hammering. He had escaped. He was free. And he was, once again, stranded. But this time, he had the prize. He grabbed his flashlight from the Ranger's remnants, now in his pocket. "Okay, Bolt, let's see what we paid for." He slid under the truck, Bolt right behind him. He found the spot. That hollow ting. His initial inspection was right. No handle, no lock. But his flashlight, a focused LED beam, revealed something the desert sun had hidden. Scratched into the metal, almost invisible, were numbers, a sequence. DT-22. Reed stared. A date? DT? It meant nothing. He ran his fingers over them. They weren't buttons. They weren't dials. He pushed. He pulled. Nothing. "What, Conroy? What's the riddle?" He sat back on the cold sand, frustrated. Bolt nudged his hand, whining softly. "I don't know, bud." He absently fiddled with the chain around his own neck, pulling out his own dog tags. And next to them, the one Conroy had mailed him before that last deployment. "A spare," Conroy had written. "In case you lose yours, you dumb bastard." Reed had kept it as a memento. He aimed the flashlight at it. "Vance, Marcus Conroy, 8110-0582, type O post no pref." Reed's blood stopped. 8110-0582. The numbers on the truck weren't 10-0582. They were 10-0582. And DT wasn't Delta Tango. It was dog tag. He scrambled back under the truck. The numbers weren't a code. They were coordinates on the steel plate. He looked at the dog tag again. 81. He found a tiny, almost welded-over 81 on the plate, 4 feet from the other numbers. He pressed it. A faint click. He went back to the sequence. He pressed the spot marked 10, click, 05, click, 82, click. There was a loud hiss of hydraulics releasing. A hidden seal broke, and a 200-pound section of steel plate, thick as his hand, swung down on a counterweighted hinge. It was open. Reed shined his light into the dark, velvet-lined cavity. He'd expected guns, gold, drugs. It was none of those. It was one thing. A single, matte black, military spec hard case, padlocked and chained to the frame. And attached to the chain was a single laminated piece of paper, a formula. The hydraulic hinge sighed, and the 200-pound steel plate swung open, revealing the guts of the M939. Reed lay on his back in the sand, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the absolute darkness of the arroyo. The distant whoosh of traffic on the I-40 overpass was the only sound. The payload. It was chained to the frame with a length of black, case-hardened steel chain. At the center was a matte black Pelican case, but the chain wasn't holding the case. It was holding a complex, custom-built device that was plumbed directly into the truck's fuel and electrical systems. The Pelican case was just one component in a larger, sinister-looking assembly of braided steel hoses, copper coils, and a digital interface, all of which was clearly not 1980s military issue. The laminated paper Reed had seen was attached to the case itself. He reached in, his fingers brushing the cold metal, and unclipped it. His flashlight illuminated the title, CFC V7.2, Operating Protocol. It wasn't a formula. It was an instruction manual, a quick start guide. Below the text were 2 simple, terrifying diagrams. The standard M939 diesel fuel flow. The catalyst fuel flow showing a bypass loop. The Pelican case itself was secured with a heavy-duty combination padlock. "A riddle," Reed whispered, his breath fogging. "Conroy, you son of a bitch. You loved your riddles." He thought of Kincaid. He thought of the $5,000. He thought of the 72-hour deadline that no longer mattered. His eyes snapped back to the padlock. Of course. He knew Conroy. Conroy was smart, but he was also lazy. He hated remembering new numbers. He used the same ones for everything. His locker, his bank card PIN, everything. Reed reached for the padlock. His fingers, numb and greasy, fumbled with the dials. 120 click, 05 click, 82 click. The shackle popped open with a sound that seemed to echo off the concrete pylon. Reed unlatched the case. He opened the lid. He'd expected gold or weapons or bricks of cash. It was none of those. The case was filled with custom-cut foam, housing a single sealed data drive, a small reservoir of shimmering platinum-colored liquid, and a folded oil-stained piece of paper. It was a handwritten note. Reed's heart hammered. He knew that messy, left-handed scrawl. Read, no sir. If you're reading this, you're either smart enough to have gotten the truck running or stupid enough to be stranded. Either way, welcome to the party, pal. I built it. I actually did it. The thing we used to talk about in the motor pool, the what-if bullshit, it's not bullshit. Don't let them have it. Don't sell it. And don't trust the brass. They're the ones who sent Kincaid. They're the ones who put me in the ground. This is the only one. The prototype. The liquid is the seed catalyst. The drive has the research. The rest is, well, you're sitting in it. I didn't know who else to leave it to. You're the only one I ever trusted to guard the gate. Don't let them make it. Don't let them steal it. This is your mission now. Make it count. See. Reed's hands were shaking. He read the note again. The thing we used to talk about. He remembered. Years ago, drunk on cheap beer, complaining about the cost of gas, the inefficiency of their engines. Conroy, a brilliant motor pool sergeant who was always tinkering, had a theory. The waste, Reed, it's all waste. Heat, noise, smoke. That's just unburnt fuel. What if you could build an engine that didn't waste anything? 100% efficiency? It was a drunken fantasy. Reed scrambled out from under the truck, his mind racing. He looked at the operating protocol sheet. Start primary engine, wait 30s. Engage CFC main power, red toggle, compartment. Wait for synthesis ready, green light. Engage catalyst bypass dash switch. He had to see. He climbed back into the cab. Bolt, sensing the change in his handler, whined from the passenger seat. It's okay, boy, I think. Reed turned the key. The M939 roared to life. The 12-cylinder diesel engine filled the narrow arroyo with a deafening, echoing thunder. A thick cloud of black smoke billowed from the exhaust stack, choking the air. The entire truck vibrated so hard his teeth rattled. This was the beast he knew. He jumped out, ran back to the open compartment, and found the red toggle switch. He flipped it. A low electric whir joined the diesel's roar. The digital display on the device lit up. A blue light flashed. Analyzing DF2 diesel. A few seconds later, it changed. Synthesizing catalyst. Reed waited, his heart in his throat. The truck bellowed, shaking the ground. Click, a small green LED lit up. Ready. He ran back to the cab and slammed the door. He scanned the dash. Conroy had been here. To the left of the steering column, where a blank panel used to be, was a new switch. A heavy-duty, military-grade switch, painted red, with a safety cover. Reed looked at Bolt. This is it. He flipped up the safety cover. He put his thumb on the switch. He took a breath, and he pushed it. The effect was not gradual. It was immediate. The sound vanished. It didn't die. It didn't sputter. The bone-jarring, deafening thunder of the engine simply stopped. Reed's body tensed, bracing for the failure. But the engine hadn't failed. He looked at the gauges. Tachometer 800 RPM. Oil pressure good. Temp stable. It was running. The cab was so quiet he could hear the tick, tick, tick of the manifold cooling. He could hear the crickets in the sand outside. He could hear the blood rushing in his own ears. The 12-cylinder engine, an engine that just seconds ago was shaking the earth, was now making no more noise than his trailer's broken refrigerator. He slowly, fearfully, leaned out the open window. He looked up at the massive exhaust stack. The column of black smoke was gone. He cautiously put his hand in front of the exhaust pipe. Nothing. No heat, no smoke. Just a faint, cool puff of air. Holy shit, he whispered. He put the truck in gear. The transmission engaged with a quiet click. He let out the clutch. The 10-ton truck rolled forward, silent as a Prius. He understood. Conroy had done it. He had cracked 100% combustion, a perfect catalyst. No wasted energy, no heat signature, no sound signature. This wasn't a multi-million-dollar formula. It was a multi-trillion-dollar one. It was the end of the internal combustion engine, the end of the energy crisis. And in the hands of a man like Kincaid, it was the ultimate invisible weapon. Reed stopped the truck. He looked at the data drive, still in the case. He looked at the handwritten note. Conroy hadn't left him an inheritance. He had left him a bomb. The silence in the arroyo was a living thing. It was heavier than the darkness, thicker than the dust. Reed sat in the cab of the M939, the handwritten note in one hand, the cold, heavy data drive in the other. The truck beneath him was a ghost, its gauges steady, its massive engine running without a sound, without a tremor. This is your mission now. Conroy's words echoed in the oppressive quiet. This wasn't a gift, it was a curse, a trillion-dollar secret, and the only man who knew he had it was a broke, hunted veteran, and a dog. Bolt, who had been resting his head on the passenger side floor mat, suddenly stood. It wasn't a sudden movement. It was a slow, deliberate uncoiling. His head came up. His ears swiveled, locking forward. A low, subsonic vibration started deep in his chest. A rumble that Reed felt more than he heard. Reed went cold. He knew that rumble. It wasn't alert. It wasn't curious. It was threat. "What?" Reed whispered. He killed the flashlight. He didn't turn off the engine. There was no need. He just sat, enveloped in the blackness, his hand on Bolt's neck. The dog's muscles were granite. Reed listened. He heard the crickets. He heard the distant hypnotic shush of a semi-trailer passing on the I-40 overpass, a mile away. And then he heard the sound that didn't belong. The crunch of tires on the gravel access road. Slow, deliberate. He looked toward the mouth of the arroyo where he'd driven in. Two sets of headlights, low to the ground, appeared. They weren't the bright, messy cones of a civilian car. They were focused, tactical beams. They swept the entrance once, then in perfect unison, they blinked out. Reed's military training, buried under years of exhaustion and cynicism, snapped back into focus. They weren't turning off their lights. They were switching to IR. "They're here," he said to Bolt. He didn't panic. He just processed. Kincaid was done negotiating. This was the logistics team, the professionals, the men Kincaid sent when a problem needed to be acquired. Reed peeked over the low-cut dash. He saw them. Three black, unlit vehicles, sleek, low-profile SUVs, not trucks. They had stopped just off the main road. Doors opened and closed with quiet, oiled thuds. Figures fanned out, at least 5 of them. They moved with a predatory grace in practiced wedge formation, a good 10 feet of separation between each man. They were carrying rifles, held at the low ready. And on their heads, Reed could see the spidery, insect-like outlines of night vision gear. They were hunting him. Reed's heart was a cold rock in his chest. He was in a 10-ton steel box with one way out. They had him pinned. But then he heard a voice, muffled, coming over a radio. "No thermal. I'm telling you, the valley's cold." Another voice, tinny and sharp. "Bullshit. I saw the smoke from the highway. That M-series lit up like a refinery. It's here. Sweep the wash. Find the heat signature." A pause. "Boss, I'm scanning. I've got a jackrabbit at 200 yards and a hot rock. But no engine. Nothing. The asset is cold." Reed looked at his own temperature gauge. It was flat-lined at ambient. The CFC, no heat signature. He almost laughed. They were hunting for a ghost. A 10-ton diesel truck that should have been glowing like a bonfire on their thermal imagers. But instead, it was just a cold rock. The professionals were confused. And confused men get sloppy. But they weren't stupid. "Forget the thermal. Go visual. Follow the tracks," the radio squawked. Reed's blood froze again. The tracks. The massive military-grade tire tracks he'd left in the sand. He watched the green glowing figures reform. They found the tracks from the highway. They began to move up the arroyo, following his trail, fanning out as they came. They were coming, fast. Reed had seconds. He looked at his options. He could surrender. He could try to run, but they'd see him. Or he could fight. He looked at the CFC switch, the red-covered toggle. Conroy's note. "This is your mission now." One of the figures was closer now, only 30 yards away. He was moving quickly, his head on a swivel. He was at the front of the truck before he even realized it. The contractor stopped. He looked up, his NVGs painting the M939 in ghostly green. He saw a truck, but he heard no engine. He felt no heat. His brain couldn't process the contradiction. He put his hand up, touching the coal grill. He tapped it. Ting. He raised his hand to his radio. "I've got it. It's off. Engine's cold." Bolt, beside Reed, was now a statue of pure, contained violence, waiting for the one word that would release him. "Not cold," Reed whispered. "Just quiet." He flipped up the red safety cover. The contractor was looking into the windshield. He couldn't see Reed in the dark, but he was pointing. "Get up here. Target is in the—" Reed's thumb slammed down on the switch, disengaging the catalyst. The effect was not a sound, it was an explosion. 12 cylinders, 855 cubic inches of diesel engine, instantly reverted to standard combustion. The thunder of the engine detonated in the narrow arroyo, a physical shockwave of sound. A massive plume of black, unburnt smoke erupted from the exhaust stack, blasting the contractor in the face. He screamed, blinded and deafened, stumbling back, his rifle firing uselessly into the sand. "Contact! Contact!" the radio screamed. Reed didn't wait. He didn't fight. He fled. He slammed the truck into first gear, a gear so low it was meant for climbing walls. He ignored the arroyo, the only exit he knew. He wrenched the wheel hard to the right and aimed the truck at the 45-degree embankment of loose rock and sand. "He's moving! Light him up!" Gunfire erupted. Sparks and pings ricocheted off the back of the truck, but Reed was already moving. He stomped on the accelerator. The M939, a truck built to move mountains, roared. Its 6 massive tires found purchase, digging into the embankment, and it began to climb. Reed was thrown back in his seat. Bolt barked, a sound of pure, adrenalized fury. They clawed their way up the unstable slope, rocks the size of bowling balls cascading behind them. The contractors were running, trying to get an angle, but they were built for flat ground speed, not a rock scramble. In 10 seconds, the M939 crested the ridge, crashed through a stand of creosote bushes, and landed hard on the flat, open desert floor above. Reed didn't look back. He kept the accelerator pinned, the engine screaming, and disappeared into the darkness. He had escaped. He was alive, and he was, in every way that mattered, at war. The desert floor was not flat. It was a moonscape of jagged rock, deep ruts, and treacherous, sand-filled washes, all of it invisible in the pitch black. Reed was driving by feel, which meant he was driving by the violent, bone-jarring crashes as the M939's military-grade suspension earned its keep. He was running loud. The engine, still in its conventional mode, was a screaming beacon of 855 cubic inches, echoing off the distant mountains. He was a 10-ton alarm bell, and he knew they were behind him. On the passenger side floor, Bolt was not pacing. He was braced, his claws digging into the rubber mat, his body a solid, tense coil, his ears flicking between the sound of the engine and the new sounds from behind. Reed risked a glance in the cracked side mirror. They were coming. 2 pairs of headlights, the tactical SUVs, were bounding over the terrain behind him. They were moving at a speed he couldn't comprehend, their long travel suspensions soaking up the bumps that were trying to tear his truck apart. They were faster, they were smarter, and they were flanking him. A high-velocity ping echoed through the cab, followed by the sound of glass exploding. The rear window of the cab, or what was left of it, disintegrated. "Down, Bolt!" Reed yelled, his voice rough. They weren't trying to disable the truck. Not yet. They were hurting him. Or maybe just one of them was a hothead. It didn't matter. They were close enough to shoot, and he was out of room. He had one move, one card left to play. It was Conroy's card. He saw it. A shallow dip in the terrain, a small gully that would, for a few seconds, break the line of sight. "Hold on, bud," he gritted. He steered the M939 into the dip, the truck vanishing from the SUV's view. The second he was below the ridge line, his hands moved in a desperate practice blur. He flipped the red safety cover. He slammed the catalyst switch on. He stomped the clutch. He killed the headlights. The world went silent. The thunder of the engine vanished, replaced by the sound of his own heart hammering in his ears and the tick-tick-tick of the superheated manifold. He was now a 10-ton ghost, hidden in a shallow grave of rock, and he was completely blind. Above him on the ridge, the 2 SUVs screeched to a halt. Reed could see their silhouettes against the star-filled sky. The doors opened. The professionals piled out, rifles up, their movements jerky and confused. He heard their radios even from 50 yards away. "Where the hell did he go? I've lost thermal. He's cold. He's gone. How is that possible? He didn't vanish. He's here. Spread out. Get the high beams." This was the part Reed hadn't thought through. He had beaten their tech. He had beaten their thermal imagers and their sound equipment. He had forgotten about the 50-cent light bulb. A pair of high-intensity light bars on the roof of the SUVs clicked on, flooding the desert with 80,000 lumens of artificial daylight. The beams were terrifying. They weren't searchlights. They were weapons. They swept the area, methodically, painting the rocks and cacti in a stark, terrifying white. They were no longer confused. They were hunting. This was no longer high-tech. This was a man with a flashlight in a dark room, looking for a spider. And Reed was the spider. The first beam swept past his position, the light so bright it burned through his closed eyelids. It moved on. The second beam started its sweep. Reed was paralyzed. The M939 was silent, but it was also a 13-foot-tall, 25-foot-long slab of American steel. It was not a rock. It was not a bush. The beam was coming, 10 degrees, 5 degrees. "This is it," he whispered. Bolt whined, a low, terrified sound. The beam hit them. It was instantaneous. The light filled the cab, as bright as a welder's arc. "Contact! I've got him! Right here!" Reed didn't wait. He didn't flip the switch. He didn't need the sound. He was already in gear. He dumped the clutch. The silent truck surged forward. The professionals, blinded by their own lights and expecting a roar, were caught flat-footed. They opened fire, but they were shooting at where he was, not where he was going. Reed kept the headlights off. He was driving in the dark, using the reflected light of their own high beams. He drove at the second SUV. The men scattered. The driver, seeing 10 tons of silent, dark metal bearing down on him, made the only choice he could. He swerved. Reed didn't hit him. He didn't need to. He just needed the space. He shot between the two SUVs, a high-stakes game of chicken. The ping, ping, ping of bullets stitched across the cargo bed. But they were too late. He was through them. He crested the next ridge, dropped down the other side, and finally, blessedly, hit a patch of paved road. It was an old, forgotten two-lane highway that cut through the Badlands. He was exposed, but he was also, for the first time, not alone. He flipped his own headlights on. He was a truck again, a loud, slow, ugly truck. But to the average observer, he was just a truck. He looked in his mirror. The SUVs were on the ridge watching him. They weren't pursuing, not yet. They were reporting. Reed looked at the data drive on the seat. He looked at Conroy's note. He looked at Bolt, who was finally nervously lying back down. He had the inheritance. He had the weapon. And he was, for the first time in 6 years, a man with a mission. He wasn't just a veteran trying to disappear. He was a fugitive, in possession of a secret that could change the world, or end it. The war he thought he'd left behind had just found him. Thank you for following Reed and Bolt's journey this far. We've seen them go from absolute rock bottom to being in possession of the most valuable and dangerous secret on Earth. They've escaped the boneyard, outsmarted a team of professional mercenaries, and proved the technology is real. But now they are on a two-lane highway with no money, no allies, and a corporation that will kill to get their property back. My question for you is, what's the next move? He has the prototype and he has the data drive. Should his mission be to destroy it, to protect it, or to expose it?